And our next speaker is Chris White, who has written the book that you have in front of you on the Papal Conclave. And Chris, why don't you come right with Speaker Pelosi for a minute, because I know you wanted a picture with you and the speaker in the book. So let's get that. Put the book there. Get that photograph too. We've got to get all the photos we can. How's that? There we are. All right, and Chris and Dr. Jeannine Marino are going to do our next part of the program.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, church. That was, I don't know that was enough excitement for me. Good morning, church.
Good morning.
There we go. So, I'm going to introduce my friend Chris here. Christopher White is the Associate Director for Strategic Initiatives and the Senior Fellow of the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown University. He's the author of the book Pope Leo XIV, Inside the Conclave and the Dawn of the New Papacy. There are copies available when you came in the door. If you haven't picked up a copy, please do. It's an excellent read. Chris is a former Vatican correspondent and national correspondent for the National Catholic Reporter and a former reporter for Crux. His work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and the Washington Post, among other print and online publications. He has regularly appeared on television and radio programs, including CNN, NPR, NBC, BBC, and as a Vatican analyst for NBC and MSNBC. He's a graduate from Fordham University and the King's College. Please help me welcome Chris here to Trinity. So I've known Chris for a while, and the last time I have seen Chris in person, we were on the other side of the Atlantic. Do you remember the last time we saw each other?
I do, but I think the story is yours to tell.
It is mine to tell. So it was June 2024 in the Pontifical North American College in the Red Room, which is a special sort of dining room that they hold very fancy and formal dinners in. It was right after Pope Francis's last Pallium Mass on the Feast of Peter and Paul. And we were there having lunch with the two new American archbishops who had received their pallium from the Pope. And the pallium is a special liturgical garment that archbishops wear. They wear it as a signal of their closeness to the Pope and their governing authority. I had my kids with me. They were the only two kids in the room. And in walks Cardinal Robert Prevost for lunch, unexpected and unannounced. So after a very long Italian lunch, probably about 2 hours, which was preceded by a 2-hour papal liturgy that my children have now sat through for 4 hours, very dressed up because I made them, they decided to explore the room, and they found a chess set, which was right next to Cardinal Harvey and Cardinal Prevost, who were having a private conversation. You were interviewing Archbishop Coyne, and my husband and I were distracted talking to other people, and I kind of glanced around the room and saw that my two children were now next to these two cardinals, completely unattended. I sort of ran over. You saw me make a dash across the room. And Cardinal Prevost tells me, "Don't worry about it. It's fine. Let the kids play chess." He said he was surprised two young children even knew how to play chess. And then he told me that my children were very well behaved. So everyone, that is how Chris and I had lunch with the new Pope. And now I get to say that the Pope said, I have very well-behaved children.
That's magisterial teaching now.
That's right. That's right. And my kids definitely throw that back at me whenever I tell them to behave. Well, the Pope said we were good, Mom. So Chris, in your book, you share similar stories about Pope Leo's kindness and his interactions with ordinary people. What are some of your favorite memories of Pope Leo and Pope Francis from your time in Rome?
Well, thank you, Jeannine, and thank you, everyone. It's great to be here at Trinity. This morning I was thinking about coming here, and I thought of a joke that's told often in Rome, and I hope you'll indulge me. The joke goes that the Holy Trinity had won a free trip, and they had to decide where to go. And God the Father said he wanted to go to Africa. God the Son said, I'd like to go to Palestine. And the Holy Spirit said they'd like to go to Rome. And they said, why? And the Holy Spirit responded, because I've never been there. It's told a lot by Vatican officials, so I think it's fair to say that we are here today to talk about something where the Holy Spirit was very much involved in, and that was the surprise election of an American pope. And I think after covering Pope Francis and us all watching his pontificate unfold for 12 years, there was just such high expectation about what would follow. And as Chris Ann mentioned, there was just, we wondered what would come next. And that was because Pope Francis was the great pope of both teaching, but he taught so often through gesture. And I had the great privilege of accompanying him on many trips around the world. And that's when Francis was so at his best. He often said that when he was outside of the Vatican, he felt the most free. So I think about being in Papua New Guinea with him. We're at 87 years old and in declining health. He not only went to the capital, but he took a day trip to this jungle town, another 3-hour flight from the capital, to go visit this particular village where they often only see a priest twice a year. And the Pope wanted to go to them to show that I haven't forgotten you. And I think that was his vision of church, and it was gestures like that on repeat that sort of linger in my mind when I think about his papacy. Pope Leo is a very different character stylistically. I think I would make the case, and I do in the book, that they share the same pastoral vision, and they have the same priorities. But Pope Leo's gestures are much more sort of intimate and small. You can talk to those that sat at round tables like this during the consultation process known as the Synod. And the way in which he just inquired about their lives, asked thoughtful questions, kept up correspondence, that's very much who he is. Anytime I encountered him, he wouldn't hesitate to stop and have a conversation on the street. He would always ask questions because he wanted to kind of use these encounters to know, to kind of know what he needed to know. So he's a thoughtful man. He wants to listen well. And I think that really is a gift in this time of the church, that we have a pope who is so committed to listening. And he sees that engagement as a way of perhaps dialing down some of the temperature that we see in the world around us by showing each other how to listen.
Wonderful. So we heard Speaker Pelosi didn't know I was going to ask this question next, but she set me up so well because we heard from her the excitement of the white smoke going up and the excitement when the name was announced, even on a plane, right? How excited people were. So Chris, you were in St. Peter's Square when the smoke went up and the name was announced and out walks the first American Pope. Can you just describe for us what that atmosphere was like? What was that feeling and how quickly did it dawn on people the significance of that name?
I think in many respects, I'm still reeling from that moment. It's something that I think will require a lifetime to fully process. I was there doing media for NBC and MSNBC. My colleague Kim Daniels was on set with CNN, and I think all of us were trying to contain our own emotions while trying to say something intelligible about what was happening. About a week before the conclave, a priest that I knew very well who had spent about a decade working in the Vatican he was living back in his home country, but in his parish bulletin, he had put an insert of all the Latin names of the papabile, the potential popes. Because the first thing you hear is the first name in Latin, and that's the code that we're all listening to know who it's going to be. And he had sent this sort of cheat sheet in Latin to myself and a few other reporters, and it was great because I had been studying that sheet. And so I heard Robertum Franciscum, and I knew that was Prevost, the American. And so I yelled Prevost to just anyone who would listen. And you could tell, there was the crew that weren't really familiar with the day-to-day workings of the Vatican, and that name didn't necessarily register. But then I yelled, "It's the American," in maybe slightly more colorful language. And that's when really people realized what had taken place. But because of all that excitement, we had missed the name. And it took quite a bit of time for us to confirm which name he had actually taken, because there had been such speculation about, will he be John the 24th, Paul the 7th. And then when we heard Leo the 14th, then we just, it was almost as if he had provided the first window of what the papacy was going to be about. And then about a few minutes later, he gives this very short speech, 500 words, that offers this blueprint where he says, he says the word peace 9 times. He says, I want a church committed to pursuing peace. He says, I want a church that is synodal, which was sort of one of the buzzwords. I make the case in the book that the Conclave was a referendum on Pope Francis's push for synodality to make the church more participatory, more welcoming. And Leo said he wanted a church that was synodal and a church that was capable of building bridges. And that was when I think we all realized that we were off to the races with a pope who may be very different in style, but is rooted in the same principles that animated Francis.
Yeah. I was leading a staff meeting when the white smoke came up. So we had a computer monitor, right, sort of like off to the corner, and we saw the smoke, and that was it. That was the end of the meeting. But I recognized the Latin too. And my staff was like,
your Latin
who's
is probably
that?
much better than my Latin.
They're like, who's that? I was like, it's an American. And they're like, no, it's not, Jeannine. Like, there's no way. And I was like, I'm telling you, it's an American. So we know the first American pope. We know that he spent years in Peru as a priest and then as a bishop. And we know that Leo is a fan of the Chicago White Sox. But who is he as a person and as a priest? Because you've spent time with him, interviewing him.
So I think there's a great video on YouTube that I would recommend watching. He did this about a year before he became Pope. He went home to Illinois and he talked about just his life in the church. And he points to Peru as the most formative time in his life. And we all know that he was a missionary. He worked alongside the poor there. But there's some great reporting that's come out in recent days. I touch a bit about this in the book. My colleague at the National Catholic Reporter, Justin McClellan, did a great report from Peru about where he served. And he served in this missionary diocese, which was alive with the spirit of the Second Vatican Council. There was an Augustinian from Chicago that had gone there, and he was later made the bishop of this area. He had attended the council, first as an observer and then later as a bishop. And he came back with this zeal and this real conviction that lay people have to be completely immersed at the heart of parish life. And they unveiled this whole new program, and it's quite complicated. But the critical insight there is this was a priest, Robert Prevost, whose formative experience was in a diocese in a missionary country where he was taught that what it means to be a pastor is standing alongside the poor, but where lay people have just as much of a place at the table as clerics. And I think that's been consistent throughout his life in the church, even as he's ascended the ranks of what we would call, the ranks of power in church life.
One of the things that makes Pope Leo special and unique is that, like Francis, he belongs to a religious community, the Augustinians. And you talk about this a little bit in the book, that formative experience of belonging to the Augustinian order and their missionary outreach, which you just talked about him being sent to Peru. Can you maybe share with us how the missionary and ecclesiological formation of the Augustinians and being in Peru really shaped Leo for when he came back to the United States and then was sent to Rome?
So Pope Leo's order, the Augustinians, are in just over 50 countries around the world. And so for starters, I'd say, one, it provided him with a global perspective. He may have an American passport, has a Peruvian passport, but his perspective is global, and I think that was critical to his election because, of course, the conventional wisdom was that no American would ever be elected pope. But he was viewed as this sort of global missionary type figure, and that is because of his formation as an Augustinian. But equally important, I would say, is sort of the own internal governance and the way of life of the Augustinians. Everything is centered around community. And Ralph earlier talked about how Catholic social teaching, everything is looking outward facing. The community life there is focused on service. So everything is done and decided in common to serve the community outside. And I think that's sort of what has grounded him. And I think that will guide him as he leads the church. What we've seen, these are early days, not even at 6 months. But he's listening to as many people as possible. He's taking the counsel of as many people as he can. But he's got an eye on the world around him. I think, sort of peace is keeping him up at night. Poverty, climate change, these are the issues that worry him. And he's doing this with this sort of external focus that he's been trained in by his order.
In reading your book, I was really struck by the continuity between Francis and Leo. I mean, they have very different personalities, but their worldview is so similar. We heard in the first panel about the need to go in order to go out, right? We pray first and then we go out to the margins, that we're called to be a church for the poor. And I think early in Leo's pontificate, even now still, we hear and we see this push as if Leo is this radical break from Francis, right? And yet, I'm not sure that's what we're starting to see. So could you maybe share with us some of the similarities that you pointed out in your book between Leo and Francis, especially their focus on Catholic social teaching?
So obviously the name was hugely significant. It was, the first tell that he wanted to be a pope committed to reading the signs of the time in the way that Pope Leo XIII was. And then this remarkable moment a few days after his election where he explained himself why he took the name, and of course artificial intelligence being a primary motivator, because he thinks the human person has to be at the center of these discussions, and the church has an important role to play in championing the human person as technology rapidly develops. So I think that's very much at the heart of his program. Obviously, with the apostolic exhortation that multiple panelists have mentioned this morning, it was written by Pope Francis and finished by Pope Leo. And as Cardinal Trinity, who works on a lot of justice and peace issues at the Vatican, says it's 100% Francis and 100% Leo, which highlights that continuity between the two. But what's important about that document, I think, is that it has this wonderful, almost history lesson. It goes back to the Gospels and then the Church Fathers to say the Church's response to the poor is not some recent sort of woke invention, but it goes back to our core principles of who we have always been, and it's quite simple. And I think that's a very intentional framing of it to say this is not, this has serious ramifications for the world around us today, but we're anchored in tradition.
It's amazing in a way. I think Chris-Ann pointed this out. Because Leo is American, English is his first language. There's no more. He didn't mean that. He didn't mean to say that because he doesn't speak English, right? Which was a frequent criticism of Francis when they wanted to downplay his focus on social justice. And I think Leo was so brilliant in that apostolic exhortation of going back to the gospel, to talk about the care for the poor in Catholic social teaching, because as you said, so much of the criticism of Francis, especially from this country, was that he was a woke pope, right? That he was somehow incorporating these foreign principles into the church. And yet, Leo so beautifully says, no, we do this because Jesus commanded us to. It's right here. So that was his first exhortation. What do you see, what do you hope for in his future writings and actions for how Leo may continue to address social justice issues? I know it's dangerous to predict what the Pope is going to do, but if you can indulge us, Chris.
Well, I think we do have an encyclical to look forward to where he will look to Rerum Novarum, but update it to read the signs of the time today. And I think, of course, AI will be a huge part of that. But I think he's going to sort of take us back to take us forward. So I think that this is going to be an incredible moment for him to sort of give us the sort of more comprehensive blueprint of his papacy. I think it's a moment for U.S. Catholics to sort of, in a sense, rise to the occasion to listen to the Pope. You can look back to 2015 when Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si came out, calling for us to protect our common home. And I think that was one of the moments where some Catholics decided that they weren't going to fall in line with this Pope. They could write him off. And I hope we don't see a similar pattern play out with Pope Leo's encyclical. I think there will be something in there that challenges everyone because Catholic social teaching does make everyone quite uncomfortable, and I think it doesn't fit well with any political party, and that's, in a sense, the point, to challenge us.
Your book highlights my favorite priority of Pope Francis, synodality. Synodality is this way of being church together, right? How the church journeys together by listening to each other on the road towards holiness. And I know in the first panel, one of the question that came from the floor, I think, summarized what synodality really is about. Talking to people when you never would have spoken to them before, right? To expand your horizons. That's a beautiful little theology on synodality and what it means. You know, Francis, when he called the synod on synodality, he asked the church to really embark for the first time in its history on a multi-year discernment process where Catholics talk to one another, where lay Catholics are at the table with cardinals and bishops, where women religious are given the same place as priests at the table. And the purpose really is to learn how to talk to each other better and how to listen to one another. A lot of critics of the synod call it a meeting about meetings, right? Their way of saying this isn't really important. But Leo went to every single synodal meeting. He sat at a table with men and women from Africa, men and women from South America, Central America, from Papua New Guinea. Can you maybe share with us how the Synod on Synodality influenced Leo?
I think synodality was and is Pope Francis's great legacy. And I think Pope Leo is deeply committed to continuing that legacy forward. And in fact, in the only official sit-down interview that he's given since becoming Pope, he pointed to synodality as sort of the antidote to overcoming our political polarization that we see. Talking and interviewing people that sat at his table during that time, they just attested to the fact that he was deeply interested in a wide range of perspectives. And, you know, those participants range from other cardinals to young students. And what they attest to is this is a man who listens first and foremost before he speaks, but he deeply is committed to everyone having a voice. And that's also what people that have worked for him in his Vatican office have told me, is that when he runs meetings, everyone gets their say. And then he will decide, but everyone has an opportunity to speak their mind. And I think he thinks that for far too long, like Pope Francis thought, the church operated in silos, particularly when it talked about different issues. And I think Pope Francis just said, "Basta, enough! Too much of this. Let's all sit together under one, as one communion." And I think what we saw in those 2 years of those Rome meetings with Leo was someone who was, in a sense, a quiet cheerleader of that process and is carrying that forward into his papacy. And I think one way in which it will be distinctive for Leo is that he wants the Vatican, an institution that historically operates with many, many departments that don't speak to one another, to start to model synodality so that the rest of the church can follow in line.
So Leo indicated it in his very first speech from the Loggia, that very short, 500 words. As you said, he mentioned synodality right from the start. And Sister Natalie Becquois, the Undersecretary for the Vatican Synod Office efforts, she was here in the United States last week speaking to a joint gathering of the American and Canadian canon lawyers. And she very clearly challenged all 400 of us in that room and said, the synod is not going away. It will continue under Leo. What are your hopes for the future of the Synod on Synodality and Catholic social teaching?
First, I want to say a huge applause goes to you, Jeannine. You have been a great practitioner and model of synodality. So
thank you.
This is the expert to talk to if you want to know how to do it. So I should be asking you the question. But I think this process of synodality has just really made the faith come alive to so many people around the world who feel as if, for the first time in their lives, that they're given a chance to have a say in the future of their church. And I think back to, there's been some criticism by some people that wanted to dismiss the process in this country to say only a small percentage of Catholics participated in it. And that may be true, but I also think back to being in Nairobi during one of their major conferences for the Synod, where they had 5 million people that had participated in the Synod consultation process. And I think that sort of enthusiasm is very much alive. So I think the first hope is that that the flame remains lit, and that it's carried forward. We have, there are 10 study groups, and I don't want to get too in the weeds, looking at very specific topics of the Synod. And Pope Leo has given the Vatican Synod Office, his backing to say, go forward, do this work. And now I think the question is, how do you take the skeptics and bring them along and invite them into that process? And I think that's the question that he's interested in the moment.
Yeah. So I'll take the bait and I'll answer your question because Chris is a reporter, so he always likes to
recovering reporter.
That's right. Ask questions back. But I would say I have a couple hopes for the Synod on Synodality and its integration into Catholic social teaching. I would say I would love for more young people to be involved in the efforts of Synod on Synodality. I think one of the areas when I was leading the Synod efforts in the Archdiocese of Washington, one of the areas that we really struggled with was getting young adult Catholics to come to the parish gatherings so that their voice was heard. And I think the pastors are open to responding to the needs of the young people, if they tell them what their hopes and dreams and desires are, and their fears and their concerns. Because I think so many of our young adults will talk about immigration, they'll talk about environmental justice, they will talk about the incongruity of the pro-life message in this country, as Chris Ann spoke about. They will, as we heard yesterday on campus, they will talk about how difficult student debt is. So that is one of my hopes. I think another hope of mine is that there will be some provisions for canon law that are changed, that we actually make pastoral councils mandatory, so that pastors have to have a consultation with their lay faithful. that we make diocesan pastoral councils mandatory so that the bishops have to have a consultation with their lay faithful. And then I would love to see marriage tribunals decisions to be able to be made by a single judge, meaning it does not need to be a panel, a collegiate panel, where a layperson can only give their opinion if Father then goes along with the opinion, right? If we can have a single lay judge deciding marriage cases, which would help so many people who are struggling to come back to the church because of a failed or broken marriage. Yeah. So those are some of my hopes.
I think the synod process is, at its best, helps build the church's credibility. And that's incredibly important for young people. And at the initiative where I work at Georgetown, we had a dialogue earlier this week on how social media often undermines the solidarity that we need and people are craving. And the question is, how to get that conversation that sometimes is very active online to actually take place through a synodal conversation. And I think that is when that succeeds, the church's credibility improves, and that's so craved and necessary by so many people.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, one last question, Chris, before we open up the floor. What are your hopes and dreams for Leo's pontificate and the U.S. Church? Do you think there's a chance Leo will come back and visit us here in the U.S.?
Well, his brother has made him promise that he will bury him in the United States. So he's made that promise to his brother. So there's at least one visit in his future. Hopefully, many, many years from now. No, I think Pope Leo desperately wants to visit the United States. Pope Leo is quite young. He's 70 years old. With Pope Francis, you always got the sense that he felt as if he was running out of time from the minute he took office. And Pope Leo, I think one of the reasons he's operating at the pace that he's operating is he knows that he can take time to build his team, to listen well, and he will also take time in deciding when and where he will visit, including the United States. So we'll see him travel for the first time next month. He'll go to Turkey and Lebanon, and then he'll go to Africa in early 2026. I think he'll go to Peru after that, and only after that point can we start to talk about a U.S. visit. But I mean, this is a pope who has intentionally chosen a pope whose namesake is built, who is the father of modern Catholic social teaching. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Catholics in the United States, where there are such divides, to see this pontificate as the bridge building opportunity that he hopes it is. I hope the bishops of this country lead with example. I think they have some opportunities. We've seen that. My colleague Kim talked about how they have come together on migration, and we want to see more of that. And there are opportunities when they think about their leadership elections coming up at the conference level in the next few weeks. But this is a choice that they will have to make.
Wonderful. Chris, thank you so much for being here with us today. So I know we have a mic out here. Do we have any questions, comments, did anything he said that stirred your hearts?
Hello. I am Elder Dr. Jacqueline Norris. I'm a graduate of Trinity. I took a minor in theology, religion, and social justice. I was forced because I was a minister in the Baptist church then. But I grew up around Catholics, and Trinity has helped me to understand so many things. And the Franciscan fathers prepared me when I was being ordained up there. But I do have a question for you. I want to say that I am a womanist theologian scholar, and there are feminists, but I am the African American concept of a womanist theologian. I looked at, on the first page, about your thoughts on Martin Luther King and what was going on about then. And I was wondering, as a reporter, the similarity of what is happening today and how the church is once again wrestling with the existence and question of the role of the church today? Because there are similarities. So that's my question.
Oh, thank you. I would love a conversation with you for an hour or two about this. I think, what you point to in the book is I talk about, I open the book making a parallel with the conclave that elected Pope Leo to the conclave that happened in the middle of the Second Vatican Council. And so I was sort of taking stock at what all was happening in the world and how the church was trying to position itself and reorient itself with so much happening around the world. And I would just say, not to go back to the name, but the name does mean a lot. This is a pope committed to reading the signs of the time and saying, what are the new things? So that's why this tremendous speech that the Pope gave yesterday on the popular movements gathering in Rome that my colleague Kim mentioned deserves to be read. I mean, the language that he has in there and the way in which our rhetoric about how we talk about migration has changed. He's quite critical and uses some of the most targeted language that he's used to date. The fact that just earlier this month he had this 10-year celebration of Pope Francis's document Laudato Si, sort of calling for a renewal of care for our common home. The fact that he has used every opportunity to talk about the need for peace, particularly in Gaza and Ukraine. That is his reading of the signs of the times. Those are the front burner issues. I think there are lots of internal issues inside the life of the church that he does care deeply about, but I think those kind of are the three issues keeping him up at night right now.
If the message of the Synod is everyone has a voice, that's a kind of democratic in a sense. We know that democracy is messy. Where does that lead? Does that lead to an erosion of clericalism?
I'm just going to say a few things, but I think Jeannine has far wiser things to say on this topic. Pope Francis was really animated when he talked about the scourge of clericalism, and I think this is, he really wanted to see seminaries reformed and priests that had the smell of sheep and that knew how to walk alongside those who are suffering. And he saw the Synod process as a way of facilitating that and sort of kicking it into high gear. So you're right that it's a messy process, it's an uneven process, but it does provide a start to sort of, when you've got people who are forced, synods are not new in the life of the church. The practice of synodality goes back centuries, and they've happened since the Second Vatican Council in more or less their current form. But historically, lay people weren't inside the room. They certainly, if they were there, didn't have a vote. And for that process to almost overnight change and to force cardinals to sit across young people and mothers and fathers to have an equal voice and a vote at the table, that changed things. And the Catholic Church change often doesn't happen quickly until it does. And the Synod process did change that. And I think it is slowly changing the culture of the way church institutions operate and are expected to operate. For example, the U.S. bishops now meet at round tables as a way to facilitate more of that sort of synodal style of conversation and exchange. Is it perfect? Is it where we would like to see it? No, but it's a start.
I would say Francis acknowledged pretty regularly that synodality is messy. He said it's not easy. Everyone who has been a part of the synodal process in a sort of guiding or leadership role will say the same thing. It's hard when you even in this room right here. It's probably about 200 people, right? 150 people. We all have different opinions. We all have different viewpoints. We all have different ways of expressing ourselves. But I think for Francis and for Leo, they weren't challenged by that. They saw a beauty in acknowledging a diversity of viewpoints and a diversity of lived experiences in the church and in the world. They found that as a way to build up the body of Christ, not sort of tear it down or be afraid of it. I think one of the criticisms of the Synod has been, oh, it's like this new thing that Francis came up with. And yet, if we go back to Scripture and we read about the Council in Jerusalem, where Paul had gathered with disciples and with people leading the church in Jerusalem, he gathered everyone. He wanted to hear from the deacons who were serving the poor. He wanted to hear from the poor. He wanted to hear from the presbyters. So this isn't sort of a newfangled thing. This is a very ancient process in the Catholic Church that frankly we somehow lost. Our Eastern brothers and sisters in the Orthodox and in the Eastern Catholic churches never lost this tradition. They've always had synods, and I think for some reason, for a lot of reasons that would take me a very long time to explain, in the Roman Catholic Church and the Latin Church, we just lost how to do this, and I don't know, I guess I'm not afraid of it turning into a democratic process, because I don't think that's a bad thing to be afraid of, right? And I think listening to each other helps us experience Christ. Yeah.
I would just add one thing. One of the stories I tell in my book is when Pope Francis in 2023 was in Lisbon for World Youth Day. Was this great moment. It was the opening ceremony, and young people from all around the world had come to be there in Portugal. And Pope Francis had been sick that summer, and we reporters weren't sure how he was going to do. It was going to be a demanding trip, and instead he gives one of the most, I would say, one of the most memorable speeches of his entire pontificate, where he throws the script aside, which always made us nervous because then we were on edge. And he said, you young people, you want people to speak honestly and truthfully to you. And so I say to you that I want everyone to be welcome in the Catholic Church. And then he has this expression that he ended up repeating, multiple times after that point. Todos, todos, todos. Everyone, everyone, everyone. And he got the crowd just sort of riled up saying, say it in your own language. And he said, I can't hear you. And he was really playful with them. But it was such a defining moment of his pontificate. But on the way back to Rome, we had an in-flight press conference with Francis. And one of my German colleagues said to him, those were nice words, you said todos, 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 but what about women? What about LGBTQ people? What about migrants? And really pushed the Pope on this. And the Pope smiled and he said, that's a great question, and it's courageous. Thank you for asking it. And then he explained, he went to explain what he means by todos, todos, todos. But it didn't make him nervous at all. He thought he'd rather the questions be asked than for them to be shoved underneath the table.
Yeah. I think we have another question.
Oh, thank you. And thank you. When I saw that we were going to be doing this, I was so excited because I like you and like the speaker, I didn't expect an American pope. I work a lot in Asia. I was in Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste when Francis, and they're so devoted, and the whole country turned out for Francis in Timor-Leste. And I really thought there'd be a Filipino pope because they're so devoted. I really thought it was going to be an Asian pope. So, and whoever thinks there's going to be an American pope. But I was so excited. And the fact that he was from Chicago was even better. But when he took his name, I was so excited because of the whole 20th century being influenced by Rerum Novarum. By every 10 years, the popes were issuing writings on it, but really exciting writings in terms of, I'm hoping we talk more about this, the women who were inspired. When you were talking about synodality, I think something like what this Pope wants to do in terms of the tradition of Leo it will promote that because the laity is involved and working together with the clergy and women, may I just say, because You've got Jane Hull, you've got Mother Cabrini, after Rerum Novarum, and after Quadragesima Anne, under Pius XI in 31. I swear Francis Perkins must have been influenced by that. And you have all of that and the labor. And then you have Dorothy Day. I mean, we have this whole of women participating based on, I think, social justice, liberty, family, solidarity. And then you have Pope John Paul II, who, Laborans Exercens, I mean, he comes out of the movement in Poland, the labor movement, and we talk about solidarity. Well, that was Solidarność. I mean, he was the embodiment of that as well. And so I have real hope here. And when I was here in the 70s, we arrived to a burned out Washington after Martin Luther King assassination, after all of this, and the nuns here were amazing. They've always inspired me in terms of their outward look to the community, go in and go out, and our Trinity girls were out there working in the community as well. But I really think, and you look at Sister Dorothy Stang, I mean, is she not the embodiment of that? So I'm really hoping we can link this women synodality, working with both the lay women and the religious women. And I'm just loving this. Thank you all so much. And I learned so much. I didn't think of the canonical aspect of it. You have to change the canon law. See, that's why I came to learn something. But thank you.
Thank you.
And wouldn't it be an amazing moment for an American pope to canonize Dorothy Day?
And Augustine Tolton.
Exactly.
And Theo Bowman.
Yes.
I could go on. I have a whole list.
At one of my book events in Chicago, some of his second cousins came, and they said their big hope is that, given Leo's sort of mosaic of a background, that he will have an attentiveness to the need for the U.S. to have black saints.
I hope so. We've got 7, the saintly 7. They need to be canonized soon.
I am very happy that this conversation is taking place at Trinity, because when I was here, the person who espoused these ideas in my mind the most was Sister Joan Bland. And I just came across her obit, which I had copied and saved when she died in 2008, yesterday as I was cleaning out my desk. She is smiling now. I came to Trinity in the fall of 1959. So John the 23rd was there. I mean, we loved it. But Sister Joan was she must have inspired John Paul. She had us working on dialogue, and there was a procedure for dialogue. The dialogue was you listen as much as you talk, and you prepare yourself so you know your facts before you go in. This was not debate. This was dialogue, opening yourself up to other people, which was such an inspiration. She also stressed the fact that the word Catholic means universal. And we have to, I have kept that in mind. My children live all over the world, so it helps a lot. And they have different ideas. But I thank you for doing what you're doing, and I think we need to further this enthusiasm for synodality, dialogue, whatever you want to call it. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we're actually almost at time for the next panel to start. I think we have 5 minutes. Do we have time for one last question and then one last one, and then we'll sort of make a change for our next panelist to come up?
So in this world in which DEI has become a dirty word, a healthy planet has plenty of diversity, and any monocrop is vulnerable to disease and to inputs that are too expensive. So what do we know about Leo's true, respectful awareness that every one of the streams of Christianity has a special charism that it brings to the glorious arboretum of Christianity, and that we are not the only ones as Catholics.
Yeah. I think we're, so much could be said for this, but I'd say in this very moment right now, we're in a very rich season where Leo is highlighting the special relationship and the desire for Christian unity. So just yesterday was a historic day at the Vatican where he met with King Charles at the Vatican. They prayed together in the Sistine Chapel, a historic first, and then we'll see 4 weeks from now, at the end of November, he's going to go to Turkey to carry out a trip that Pope Francis had hoped to make to mark 1,700 years since the Council of Nicaea, a huge moment for Christian ecumenism. So the fact that in the first 6 months of his papacy, these two sort of pillars sort of stand there as defining features of the early papacy of Leo, I think shows a great attentiveness to the Pope's desire for Christian unity. And the final thing I will say, and Jeannine has much more to say about this, the synod process has been a great gift for that, because that has not just been restricted to Catholics, but it's been invitational to Christians and people of no faith at all to feel as if they have a seat at the table.
Yeah, he also, the Holy See also sent a congratulatory note on the election of the new Archbishop of Westminster? Canterbury, who for the first time is a woman. And that happened 2 weeks ago, I think? Maybe 3 weeks. So he is certainly at a moment of history of reaching out to a lot of our Christian brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Joan Ferrante, class of 63. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
there you go.
We can't finish talking about popes without talking about the fact that everyone who's here on campus today is walking on a campus that was blessed back, Pat, please help me, by what pope came here to John Paul, was it John Paul II? It was Nancy said that there are thoughts of Trinity that bring tears to her eyes. There is no way that I ever think about that day here on this campus where it was the blessing of the handicapped. And when I tell you handicapped, I mean there were young people on stretchers who could not move. There were wheelchairs all around the whole court outside. And we were told the Pope was just going to drive through and bless the handicapped. Well, he was so moved by the sight that he stopped the car. His guards were livid that he was getting out that day. Correct, Pat? Yes. His guards were livid. You cannot get out of this car. We don't have the right security. He just looked at them and said, I am getting out, and he walked around and blessed every single person that was in the wheelchair and on the stretcher. And is there a post, something on the front of the chapel? Yes. Okay, so before you leave today, go to the chapel and you will see a memorial to the day the Pope was on this campus, so you all walking on his footsteps. Nancy, thank you, because you said there are things that bring tears to your eyes. The thought of that day always brings tears to my eyes. And Nancy and Rita, thank you for always reminding us how blessed we were to come to Trinity. But that day is an important day for Trinity.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.